This podcast is for SEO professionals, and each week, with the help of our wonderful guests, we discuss the important stuff that actually affects our careers and progression, but sadly often doesn't get talked about. You know, the invaluable soft and interpersonal skills that are often taken for granted, such as the skills we need for listening, time management, communication, and more. We also talk about the big issues that affect us and our careers, such as burnout, imposter syndrome, self-belief, saying no, plus other big issues and obstacles. With this podcast, we want to share knowledge on topics that unlock our listeners' true potential and enhance not only their careers, but all parts of their lives. So, are you ready to prioritize your own personal growth and career development? Then let's crack on with this week's episode. Hello, Tazmin, and welcome to our 100th episode.
Can you believe it? 100! Crikey, O'Reilly.
I mean, time flies when you're having fun, and part of me is a bit sad that we're not in Lyrebird Studios this time, because I feel like you could have hit one of the sound pads for a cool sound effect there. Maybe you could just make one.
Oh no, I can't. You have a go. Actually, I don't even have like a fork or spoon to tap against my glass. You know,
As
like
in
they do
like
at wedding
speech.
receptions.
Wow, congratulations to us in the podcast for reaching 100 episodes. Did you think when we first started this, way back when, that we'd reach 100 episodes?
I mean, maybe I should have a speech. I could do it like the Oscars. I don't have anything prepared, but I would like to thank my mother. My manager. I don't have a manager, just for anyone listening.
I mean, straight away, I know a bunch of like people that I'd like to thank if we're going down that route, and obviously would 100% like to thank you for, being a stellar co-host and bringing to life the SEO Mindset podcast. Also want to thank all of our dear listeners who tune in and listen, but who also reach out on social media, on different platforms, that buy us a coffee, who say nice things about the podcast, that shout about the podcast, all the wonderful guests that we've had, everyone who's come on to talk about a important subject where they've got vulnerable and open, and where we've been able to talk about stuff that really matters, the sponsors that we've had for the podcast. Crikey. Friends, family, loved ones, Benny the dog.
Oh,
Is there anyone
Benny.
I'm forgetting? Jack, Search with Candor, for the live podcast that we do.
Yeah, yeah. And I likewise would like to thank you because not only have you illustrated and to me the power of podcasting, but have helped me on that journey because I very much am the amateur in this podcasting relationship. I'm learning thanks to you, and it's given me a chance to have a voice, which I know is the reason why you love podcasting so much.
One thing that has come to mind now, Tazmin, is you're 100 episodes in, you're interviewing people. We make money from the podcast. Can you seriously still call yourself an amateur podcaster?
Mid-range. Should I say mid-range?
You're more than mid-range. You're killing it. I
Oh,
did I did hear an interesting stat actually, that it can be a bit overwhelming for people who want to start a podcast, because when you look, there's millions out there. But what's really interesting is lots of people start a podcast, but not a lot of people stick at it. So I think
Mhm.
usually it's called like pod fade, where you sort of like you run out of love or you stop podcasting. And there's a kind of thing that a lot of podcasts don't get over 7 episodes. So the fact that we've got over that 7 benchmark and we're celebrating 100 episodes, we should celebrate this win and take the time to reflect, right?
That is actually very true. And I think, I know we're going to be talking a lot more about it during this episode, but the reason why we started is as strong now as it was then. So that's probably what's helped us get to this point.
Yeah. And again, such a pro. You've segued us nicely in there. But yeah, so because this is our 100th episode, we wanted to do a format that was a little bit different, or do something a little bit not the same, because obviously it's our 100th episode. And what we decided was something that we always talk about, is that we should celebrate our wins. So we're going to use this episode to do that. We also talk about the importance of reflection, so looking back on what you've done and your achievements. So we're going to do that. And also just like taking stock, having a conversation. Because what would be really interesting is to hear what we both want to see in the future. Like there's lots of stuff that we've achieved and lots of goals and stuff that I didn't even think was going to happen when we first started. So I think this is going to be a really lovely episode where we can just, have like a good old chit chat about a lot of interesting things regarding the podcast and getting to where we are now.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So I think a good place to start, and you've already alluded to it anyway, is what was our why? And it'd be interesting to think if the why has changed or if anything has like developed. But what was the reason that you started the podcast?
So the starting point was me having lots of conversations with people in the SEO space, mainly through the Women in Tech community, about what their challenges were. And they were talking about imposter syndrome, they were talking about burnout, mental health. And I'd gone to Brighton and there was a talk about, your anxiety and worry when you're dealing with client relationships. And somebody in the audience asked the speaker, so what do we do? Where can we go and get resources? And she said, oh, you can listen to podcasts. That was one of the things she suggested. Um, and it's a bit like when you look back and you see all the dots aligning. So that conversation was in my head. The conversations I'd had with community members was in my head. And then you put out a message on Women in Tech saying, anybody who'd like to start a podcast. I think you were at the end, and I'll let you tell that part of the story yourself. And then we got talking, and that real drive to want to help people in the SEO industry with these challenges was my why. And then when you suggested the podcast, I thought I've never done that before, but this will take me out of my comfort zone. So it'll be part of my journey of growth as well. So, and I don't think that's changed. If anything, it's even more amplified because we're seeing people connecting with the podcast. We're seeing and hearing from people who are being helped by it. And now we both do. We want to make it bigger and have its reach even further.
100%, 100%. And I suppose what is interesting is when the first time we chatted, we weren't chatting about the possibility of starting a podcast together. Like you said, I did a post in the Women in Tech SEO community because something that I wanted to do was explore becoming like a podcast coach, a podcast consultant, something that I'm doing now. But 2 years ago, I was putting those feelers out and seeing if it was something that I wanted to do. And when we first had a chat, because you were like, oh, I'd be interested in having a talk with you, Sarah. And I remember that you were thinking about starting a poetry podcast, which I still think you should. There's still space. There's still time for Tazmin's poetry podcast.
Maybe it is something I'd like to do. I think with all these different goals, you just have to pick the ones that are the most important.
Yes.
One of the things I've thought about is putting it all in a book because the poetry is very aligned with personal development and growth, and it sort of in poetry reflects my journey over the last 2 years. So maybe that's something I'll do later on in the year. But I'm really happy that we did this.
You've heard it here, folks. I fluffed that up. You heard it here first, folks, is what I was wanting to say. But yeah, definitely. And I suppose the reason why, I can't even remember, was it me that first suggested that we started a podcast? Or was it more of a... I can't remember, if I'm honest.
I think we were both being very polite. I think we both thought that it would be a good idea, but we were skirting because we hadn't met, we didn't know each other. In fact, we started recording in whatever it was, the March, April time. We didn't even meet until October. I think we recorded 2 seasons by then. So we were skirting around. It's like one of those, those old-fashioned awkward dances. Should I move in? Who's going to make the first move here? And but I think the more we talked about the challenges that people were facing, the more organic it was to just have a go together. But yeah.
Because I think the drive for me is, well, I've always loved podcasts, and since 2018, when I was first introduced to the podcasting world, the podcasting industry, I've always had a podcast project on the go. And what is quite funny is I always co-host a podcast. So I always do a podcast with someone else because I feel like it's a lovely experience, a lovely project to work with someone else. And something that's quite interesting is organically, as podcasts have come to an end, I end up having a conversation with someone else and I've got another podcast, which is amazing because I love having a podcast for so many different reasons. But I think it didn't take us too long to realize that we had a really good idea, didn't we? Because we found a niche that there was lots, and there is a lot of great podcasts out there that tell you how to do SEO, so different technical or interesting aspects of how you do your job as an SEO, or if you want to get better at SEO and all of that stuff. But what we found was that there wasn't or many podcasts that just talk about career development, personal growth, mental health for the SEO industry. And I am so glad that we did it. We recorded our first episode and here we are, because it's amazing how many topics, or how all the guests that we've had and all the different conversations that we've had. But I don't know about you, but I still feel like we've only just scratched the surface, because there's so many times where we're even recording an episode and we'll talk about something and we're like, oh, that will make a great episode down the line. So I think, it's a therapy session for me. It's great to have a platform where we can invite others to be open, vulnerable, and honest, and to talk about important things. But I suppose I didn't sort of realize at the time how much of an impact it would have on the industry. And it wasn't until we started receiving comments, emails, or when we met people at like events like Brighton SEO, and they'd say how much the podcast has helped them, that you're like, crikey, yeah, there was definitely a space for this.
And what's really great now is that when I'm in parts of different, like I'll go back to the women in tech community. If somebody says, oh, I'm really struggling with this, want to step out my comfort zone or whatever it is, not only am I able to offer help, I can then post them to a particular episode, because we now have a bank. But absolutely, we're only scratching the surface. And each topic we discuss, you can't put all of the information in half an hour's podcast. So now we're talking about, we need a proper website, having a blog page where we can then put additional details for the listeners to then, if they so wish, go and access the extra value that way. So, yeah, I'm really, really excited about the future.
And I'm proud of us as well, because we both believed in something, didn't we? That we wanted to try, do, and implement. And I'm so glad that we both put our faith in this, because I feel like I'm getting a bit emotional and I'm getting a bit stuck on my words. So we are going to have to take a short break soon. I just thought what would be quite good is I've got some of our stats that we could share that might be quite interesting, and also, helps with the whole celebration of this podcast. So, to date, so at time of recording, all time, the podcast has had over 12,000 downloads, So in effect, we've helped over 12,000 people.
That's brilliant. Really, really good.
And in addition to that, when I look at... Crikey. All right. So I know that we looked at these stats before recording, and I said about how many countries that we'd reached, but I didn't realize that that was just for a 28-day period. I've looked at all
Oh,
time.
yeah.
So I want you to guess how
Oh
many
no,
countries we have reached. I mean, it's a hard thing to guess.
50. I'll say 50 countries.
100, 111.
Wow. Wow. Pretty
Our
amazing,
top five.
Now, I want to go back to the 111. 111 different countries have been impacted by our podcast. I mean, not the whole country, obviously. I'm not delusional. It's
We're
pretty
global,
good
baby.
going. Pretty good
Say
going.
that again.
I said, it's pretty humbling, actually. Really humbling.
Yeah, and I mean, this is one of the many reasons why I love a podcast is you can hit people globally. It's such an accessible platform where I get that it can be overwhelming to get started first, knowing like all the different equipment, technology, software, knowing how to do a podcast. But once you've got the basics, it's quite accessible, and you can start a podcast and be reaching people across the globe. And our top five countries are the US, the United States. So that's number one. Then it's the United Kingdom. Maybe we need to go over to the US, Tazmin, and do a special something over there. We basically need to go all to these places. We need to go to the United States, the United Kingdom. Then we've got Canada is number three, a lovely place we need to go visit. Then we have India is our number four. And then I'm going to put you on the spot again. Out of all the countries in the world, what are you thinking is number five?
Oh, I don't like it when you do this. Ireland.
Germany.
Really?
Ireland. Ireland is number seven, so you were
Okay.
close. So that's quite a lot of different countries. We've done 3 live podcasts, and altogether we have, well, for our last live podcast, technically we sold out twice, didn't we, of tickets? That was wonderful. But we have sold, and I'm saying sold with like a caveat because they were free to attend. But yeah, we've sold 200 tickets for the live podcasts.
I love our live
We've had,
podcast.
yeah,
I really
that
love it.
is, yeah. We've had people support us and buy us a coffee. So we've had our listeners donate and buy us a coffee, which is always wonderful. And we've also had sponsors of the podcast as well. We've had SEO companies and organizations believing in us and sponsoring us.
Yeah, rightly so too. And this isn't a Tasmin and Sarah, let's brag about our success story only. It is to encourage anybody out there that if you have an idea and if you want to take it into a podcasting platform, do it, because you've got no idea what success is waiting for you.
And arguably, it doesn't just have to be a podcast, right? Any idea, anything that you want to do, if you've got a good idea, if you've got an inkling, if you've got this feeling in your gut that you really want to try something because you're going to enjoy it, it's going to push you, it's going to help you progress, do it. Because me and Tazmin, I think this is a good place to end part one. But yeah, anything that you want to try, go ahead and do it. Give it a go. Because if me and Tazmin hadn't have decided to run with the idea and do the SEO Mindset podcast, if we hadn't decided to even record that first episode, we wouldn't be where we are today.
Brilliant. Good place to end part one.
to celebrate reaching 100 episodes. Still can't quite believe I'm even saying those words. Crikey, how did we make it this far? Anyway, I'm derailing myself. To celebrate reaching 100 episodes, me and Tazmin have decided to do a competition. We're doing a giveaway. So, 4 lucky listeners have the chance to win a one-to-one private life or career coaching session with Tazmin, or a 1-hour one-to-one SEO or podcast coaching session with myself. So if you fancy a bit of that, if you fancy winning time with either me or Tazmin to work on your life career goals, or maybe you want help with SEO or starting a podcast, then get on over to the show notes, because there's a link to the competition and how you can enter. Good luck, everyone. Hi, Sarah here. Just quickly reminding you of the ways that you can support the podcast. So if you enjoy what me and Tazmin are doing, there are a couple of ways that you can support us. We are set up on Buy Me a Coffee. That means that you can give us a one-off donation. If you fancy doing that, there's a link in the show notes, and we would be very, very appreciative of that. You can also sign up to our newsletter. So if you want to keep up to date with the latest, with what's going on, episodes, events, anything and everything that me, Tazmin, and the podcast are up to, you can do that by signing up to our newsletter, and you can unsubscribe at any time. So we are back with part 2. Have you were you sat with those impressive stats, Tazmin? Were you feeling proud?
I was feeling humbled, grateful, proud, excited, all good emotions.
Do you know what? I'm so glad we decided to do this episode, because I feel if we hadn't have taken this moment to do this, we would have just cracked on with the 100th episode, and then 101 episode and 102, and we would have forgotten to celebrate our successes. And we've already done an episode about celebrating our wins. So it's good that we're practicing what we preach.
Yeah. It's a bit like when we got to 2 years. Do you remember? We got to 2 years and it just passed.
But I think something that we both are aware of is that we crack on with stuff, don't we? We're very much, we're both like this, where we just get stuff done, we crack on, we get one project done, or we get one thing done, and then we move on to the next. So I think, it is a good reminder to everyone to sort of, reflect, take time to breathe and have a look. Okay. So we've kind of already sort of started to answer this question. But what have we learnt from this? So we've already said about just starting a project. So if there's something that you want to do, there's something that you want to give a go, like that you think is going to be a good idea, and you just want to roll it out, just go for it. Yeah. So we've already said that. But is there anything else that you have learned from this experience so far?
So yeah, you're right. Just start, because you can't get to the 100th episode until you've recorded the first. So take that first step, and you don't know where that first step is going to take you. For example, we never ever thought about doing a live podcast right at the beginning. You don't know, as you go through each door, you don't know what other doors are there going to be there for you to open. We didn't know who we would have on the podcast. We wouldn't have known who would have benefited from it. So that would be absolutely my top thing about what I've learned. And I think also be really open and widen that lens of your learning, because if we look at the range of guests that we've had and their real vulnerability in how they spoke to us, it's provided definitely with me with so much to learn, and it's inspired. So you don't know where that inspiration is going to come from. You don't know where that knowledge is going to come from. So go with the flow.
Yeah, definitely. And I think especially if you're trying something new for the first time, there is going to be this learning curve. So you've got to go with the flow, because that's the only way that you're going to learn and carry on doing whatever the project is. You've got to be open. You've got to be vulnerable yourself, because while you're trying something new and you're going through this learning process, and me still, so I've been podcasting since 2018, but there's still things that I'm learning, because as you develop and get better at a certain skill or a certain thing that you know how to do, you're continually learning. You're continually learning what to do and what not to do. So I think you have to you have to be open, you have to be vulnerable, you need to be flexible as well, and you also need to learn to be kind to yourself. So you're going to make mistakes, and I have made so many mistakes in podcasting journey, my journey as a podcast coach and consultant, my journey as a freelancer, my journey as an SEO professional, my journey as a speaker. There's lots of things, lots of skills, lots of things that I've developed and had a go at. And yeah, I'd say that I'm all right at now, but I've had to learn by failing, right? I've had to learn by making the mistakes, learning, okay, I'm not going to do that again. So I think you need to be aware and prepared that not everything's going to go to plan, but that's okay, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think um, not to beat yourself too much about it. I watched, I think it was Federer talking about that when he's playing a point, it's the most important point that he's played. That's it. But when he's played it, even if he's lost it, he doesn't think about it. Now it's the next point. And I think if you carry um, that negative feeling about failure into your next project, into your next podcast episode, into whatever, it's then going to tamper with the energy that you bring to that new session. And just let it go. Absolutely learn from it. Take that learning forward, but not the negativity.
I think you've also got to remember to have fun as well. And because I think I think I think me and you are good, because we do have fun. So when we are recording podcasts, like whilst we're talking about serious and important topics, we try and have fun with it as well. And when we meet and when we hang out in person, we have fun. It's not all serious business mode. This is a podcast, because that's not what we're about. That's not what the podcast is about. But I do think there is a tendency of, when you're starting something or you want to build something or you're wanting to develop a project, that you think you have to be serious, like, or too serious. Like, remember, life is about enjoyment. Life is about fulfillment. Life is about having fun. And the whole reason why we started this podcast was to address the gap in the industry for a podcast that talked about important topics. Yes, I get that. But it was also a project that me and you could work on, which we would get fulfillment out of, but we'd learn lots from. But it was fun, and it is fun. And I think that's a real big learning, is it's, if it's a hobby, if it's a project, I suppose it depends what you're working on, if it's for like work or a client or what have you. But don't forget to have fun, because that's what's going to help you keep going, or that's what's going to help you create something that is of worth and value.
I 100% agree. And I think it's not that we have never taken a step back and thought about strategy. We do, but we don't do it in a way where we've, created some task out of it. We've taken a step back and thought about, well, how else are we going to add value and how we're going to increase our reach. But every time we record, it's never, ever felt like work.
It doesn't. And yeah. And every time I record a podcast episode with yourself, or whenever I record a podcast episode with a guest, it's enjoyment. I'm enjoying the conversation. I'm enjoying having a platform, and I feel very appreciative that I have a platform which enables me to have these conversations with awesome people in the industry, and to get to hang out with you, Tazmin, as well. What are you excited about? So we've talked about lots of things that we've achieved, what we're proud of, and all of that lovely stuff. What does the future hold for the podcast? What are you most excited, or what would you like to see?
Okay, I'm going to try and articulate this as best I can. It is excitement, but it's also a learning curve and a growth opportunity for me. I feel with the podcast, we've created these big boots that can have a real impact to the SEO industry. It's needed, everyone knows it's needed, and now it requires me to step into them, grow quickly into them, and start walking. What I mean by that is, now I feel as if, I'm not speaking for you, speaking for me. It's not that I'm not a confident person, but I think we've created something that has such potential, and now I want to do it justice. Now I want the industry and the industry leaders to recognize, and a lot of them already do, what value this podcast brings to individuals. And I want them and us to start collaborating better and increasing the impact that it has. And that partly requires me to grow my feet and walk in those shoes as they deserve to be walked in. Does that make sense?
It does. And for some reason, I'm a visual person, and I don't know what our listeners are visualizing right now, but I've got a picture of you in massive I don't know why they're cowboy boots, but there's little Tasman in these massive cowboy boots, and you've got to grow in them. Yeehaw.
So I'm thinking of this big giant, like Jack and the Beanstalk type giant. And those boots are there. I'm going to put my feet in them and stomp around. So no more ignoring the SEO Mindset podcast.
It did also make me think about a song as well. These boots are made for walking.
And in all seriousness,
No one needs to.
that's what I'm
Yeah.
excited about. I'm excited about the potential that this podcast has, working with different industry leaders, and really, really helping the people of the industry, the SEO community, with the challenges that they're facing that we can help with.
They are pretty big boots, Tazmin, but if there's anyone to fill them, I'm sure it can and would be us, right?
Yes, absolutely. And if any of our listeners are thinking, I want to do that, I want to help Tazmin and Sarah on this mission, then please, you know where we are.
Come find us. Yeah, I'd agree with that sentiment, because like when we first started this podcast, we didn't really know what the opportunity was and where it could go. but 100% from the feedback and everything that we've achieved up to this point, like this does have big boots that it definitely can fill, and I'm excited to see us work towards that. And something that I would like to add in as well is I'm excited about other opportunities that come our way because of the podcast. So we've already talked about the live podcast that we do twice a year during Brighton SEO. Like that is one of my favorite times of the year, because usually a podcast is very one way, because you don't usually get to interact with your audience. Yes, you can on social media and if they reach out to you and all of this stuff. But while you're recording, or a lot of it, it feels like you're talking to them. And having the live podcast, it was really special because you're breaking down that wall and your audience is there, and they're not only there while you're recording, but they're part of the recording process. They're getting involved, they're asking questions, they're sharing stories, and they're involved in that whole episode, that whole live podcast episodes for that evening. And that is so special to me, and I love those sessions. I love whenever we do a live podcast. And yeah, I'm excited to carry on growing, carry on seeing where this podcast goes. Obviously, we're going to get a website done. We've got more ideas about other avenues, more resources, different things that we can do to support the industry and stuff. But I'm not a big planner. I'm more, I've already alluded to this, like I go with the flow with stuff. So whilst I am good at coming up with ideas and I love coming up with ideas, I'm like, oh, this would be good, let's do that. There's not a pre-plan for that. They just kind of come organically as I'm working through something. So yeah, I'm just excited to see where this goes and where we can take the podcast, Tazmin.
Yeah, yeah. And you said that organically every time a podcast had ended, another one started. And I'm thinking, I don't want this to end, not now anyway.
Well, it is funny because there's been a couple of times where you've said, so when we were recording tonight, you rang me and you said, can we postpone? And you just meant the time that we were recording. But in my head, I was like, are you asking to postpone the whole podcast?
Yeah, once I remember ringing you and saying, I needed to talk to you about something. And you said, oh, no, you're not ending the podcast. I said, no, something completely different.
I'm so anxious that you're going to break up with
Yeah,
me, Tazmin, that you're my podcast partner.
and
You can't.
yeah,
I need you.
with big feet now. Oh dear. So strange.
Obviously, if you did ever want to, break up with me and no longer do the podcast, I'm not going to hold you to it. But I'm sure that we're both fully invested and we're more excited and want to bring more episodes, and we want to see where we can go.
Absolutely.
So before we wrap up, because this one's ended up being a bit on the long side, but it's our 100th episode. I think we should allow ourselves that. What would you like the main takeaway from our celebration podcast episode to be?
Don't overthink. If there's something you want to try, just try it. What's the worst that can happen? And actually, you never know. You might end up getting to 100th episode of a podcast.
Yes, very wise. Very, very wise. You got to start somewhere, haven't you? Well, I'm afraid to say that does bring us to the end of our special 100th episode. But yeah, I feel very proud of us, Tazmin. I'm glad that we took this time to reflect.
Absolutely. Me too.
And just a reminder that if you do enjoy the podcast and you do enjoy what me and Tazmin are doing, there are many ways that you can support the podcast. First up, you can give us a one-off donation. So we're set up on Buy Me a Coffee, and there's a link in the show notes. And I would just like to do a quick shout out to recent listeners who have bought us a coffee. So big shout out and thank you to Samuel, Katie, and Sasha. So those are our 3 most recent supporters. So thank you so much. We very much appreciate you, and thank you for giving us some love and support. And we'll very much enjoy those coffees, probably at Brighton SEO like we did last time. And another reminder that we have a newsletter. So Tazmin, you're in charge of the newsletter, so sell it.
Yes, and at the bottom of the newsletter, I mean, definitely sign up. And then at the bottom of each newsletter, I ask the readers if there's anything else they'd like us to record on. So please, please, please participate in that, because then we absolutely know that we are delivering the service that you will want.
Yeah. So, and what is give us a bit more context of the newsletter. What is it? Why should people sign up?
So they'll get more details about that current week's podcast, and then I usually link it to another related episode and give some detail on that. And then I talk about anything that you and I might be doing. So Brighton SEO Time usually has snippets about the live podcast. And then there is a form that you can fill in if there's anything you want us to record. And if there's anything else you want me to write, I'm finding my feet with the newsletter. So any input from our readers would be very, very much appreciated.
Thank you so much. So again, head on over to the show notes because you'll be able to sign up to the newsletter there. Right. Shall we say goodbye? Thank you. Like, again, 100th episode. Who'd have thought it? We've made it. Well done, us. Thank you to all of our sponsors, listeners, guests, everyone, and anyone who helps with the podcast. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. This is my 100th thank you and goodbye.